Hello and welcome to another episode of the Juan on Juan podcast. I'm your host, Juan. On this episode, we talk to Luke Warm. Well, that's his alias. His real name is Luke Williamson, and he goes around ancient sites and tries to decipher who, what, why they made them. And he's gone around the entire world and to one of my favorite places ever, Egypt. We discuss some Egyptology and different sites around the area, and we also break down the effects of psychedelic. And this episode, I really enjoyed it a lot because it went from talking about ancient civilizations to psychedelics, two of my favorite things, and we incorporated both of them into the conversation about Egypt. But very, very cool episode. I really did enjoy it because, again, I feel people don't ask enough questions when it comes to these ancient civilizations and just the sheer size of these operations. And not only that, but the precision that these people exhibit with these pieces of art. And again, there's the debate whether the dynastic Egyptians really did construct these structures or if it was somebody before them, or pre-dynastic, that built these and they just inherited them. And there's a lot of friction when it comes to that realm of Egyptology because you have the mainstream academia that talks about it's a certain way, that's the way it's going to be, and no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And they're always hiding things, again, like the media. And just like George Orwell said, those who control the future control the past, and those who control the past control the future. And this is a perfect example. There's so many things that they've hidden, and only 15% of Egypt has been excavated. There's another world underneath the sand, even on the Giza plateau, and I find that so fascinating. I hope to one day visit, hopefully soon, and just go inside these places and just really see what it's all about and the energy they say that you feel when you go into these different pyramids and structures, because I believe they were used as some sort of power source, this ancient technology that we don't know anything about and we can't even begin to comprehend. So we talk about that, and again, we talk about psychedelics and their influences as well on these civilizations. But without further ado, this is Enigmas of the Ancient World with Luke Williamson. And we are live. Thank you for being on, Luke. Welcome to the show, man.
Oh, no, thank you, Juan. It's a real treat. Usually I'm doing this from your side of things. So it's a new experience.
You know how that can be, reaching out to people and how challenging it can be. And then when you get a guest who was gonna be a certain way that you thought, and he's completely the opposite.
It's you never know quite how it's gonna go down. But the worst thing, I think, honestly, in my experience, is the guys who are like, yeah, I'd love to do your show. Yeah, here's my stuff. Yeah, get in touch with me, and then they never return.
Oh yeah, you have those too. Yeah.
I'd much rather they're just like, no, I don't want anything to do with that. And I'd be like, oh, okay.
Exactly. So before we get into it, Luke, let people know where they can find your material. It's regarding one of my favorite topics, and it's ancient civilization. So go ahead and give your information out, Luke, so people can look you up.
Sure. I'm sort of spread across the internet and social media as you do. My website is enigmasoftheancient.world. And I'm on YouTube, Enigmas of the Ancient World. There is actually somebody after I took that name, somebody made a documentary called Enigmas of the Ancient World. And I'm just like, hell with it. I'm not changing the name. So that's actually not mine. But if you look for my channel on YouTube, you'll find it. I'm on Instagram, Enigmas_of_the_ancient world. And there's a Facebook page, Enigmas of the Ancient World. That's me. You'll find me eventually if you really want to.
Cool. And Luke, this is a question I ask everybody who comes on the show.
Sure.
And we get a little bit on my show. I talk about everything, life, esoteric, self-awareness, consciousness, all this, all the good stuff,
Mm.
and just really look into yourself. So this is the first question we're going to start off with. Who is lukewarm?
Well, that's not even really my last name. My last name's Williamson.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, yeah. That just was like my junk email account that just became my social media account for a while. Whatever. I just never changed it.
Oh, well.
It's funny. I've actually arrived at airports and there've been guys with signs that were to meet me say lukewarm. But really, to answer your question, I've been trying to figure that out myself. The Luke that everybody knows is just an ego construct. That's really all I am. It's the stuff that's kind of stuck to the frame and reflects what other people shine on me. I think that's pretty much what what this is. And underneath it all, at the bottom of everything, what I am and what everybody is, and this is the kind of thing you find out in those visionary plant circles, is that underneath everything, we're love. So, and then there's just the reality of the everyday world that you
Yeah.
have to cope with once you've discovered that, the return to the mundane.
So it's yeah, we're gonna talk about psychedelics as well, right, Luke?
Oh, absolutely. If
With
you want,
ancient
whatever you like,
civilizations. Yeah.
I'm open. Yeah.
We're kind of freestyling here, and again, I want to thank you for taking the time to be on. A lot of people, like we were chatting before the show, some people, I've had people who can't find enough information of me on, because again, this is a new podcast and
Right.
I've changed it up. So I've had people like, oh, who are you? Can I listen to your stuff? I can't find information on you. I've had people say no because of that.
Yeah,
So,
well,
you know,
I actually thought about it. It's funny you mentioned that because I thought about it and then I was like, oh, I better look him up, make sure it's not like a hatchet job or a hitman
and
job.
Alex Jones.
And then I thought about it and I just thought, you know what? This is what I do. It's what I am doing at the moment. It's what I love. Bring it. Come and criticize me and that's cool. I'm willing to interact.
Hopefully not, though. I mean, hopefully it's going to be good criticism. And again, I don't force anybody to talk about anything, but the people are probably wondering what we're talking about. Can you tell us a little bit of what you do, Luke, and what got you and sparked your interest in that realm of things?
Uh, well, I've always been interested in ancient cultures. I grew up in the UK actually, and it really kind of kicked off for me when I was 6. My mom had a job working in Egypt for 6 months, making a movie, and so I got to go. I was 6 at the time. I got to go along, and the world was a slightly different place then, and my mom was a pretty she didn't run a particularly tight ship. I didn't know that. There was just a ship. I didn't know it wasn't particularly tight, but she was a pretty, free mom in that way. And I just sort of got there, and within an hour, I disappeared. And they found me later begging for baksheesh with the local kids in the street. And I had sort of disappeared to go try to start a soccer game with the local kids, and they're like, "No, we play this game." And and it just all kind of started from there. Like it's just coming from the UK and then arriving in Egypt, and the smell and the sounds and the call to prayer and all of this stuff was just so completely alien. I think it had a really, really strong effect on me from a young age, and we got to do some really cool stuff back then that was illegal. I mean, you can still kind of do this stuff. I sort of try to avoid doing anything nowadays like that, but we were taken by tomb raiders, tomb robbers, into tombs that they were robbing, and there were mummies in there. And I mean, as a 6-year-old, it was just
That's
absolutely.
crazy.
It probably really affect me strongly today if it was my first time doing that, but as a 6-year-old, like so I just knew I was going to go back to Egypt, and to get into sort of the existential thing and the esoteric thing as well. My father passed in 2011, and I looked after him for the last couple of years of his life, and uh, you
Sorry to
know
hear that, man.
it's it happens to all of us, really, and you know it fell to me to try to ease him through that transition.
Mm-hmm.
And I found myself lying to him, or what I consider lying to him, and that like, it's okay to let go. Your parents are waiting for you. Like all this kind of stuff that you try to tell the person so that they, it's okay for them to let go of the vehicle. And I realized after that, while I was doing the best I could, I realized after that that I didn't I didn't know enough. I hadn't spent any time on what this is, and what we're doing there, and who we are, and that really just kind of started from a dark place, and I've just sort of been pushing out with it since then. I just totally changed my life. I took a different path. I decided to try to do things that interested me and I felt strongly about, and I just haven't really looked back, honestly, since then. And so going back to Egypt was one of those things, and it ended up I ended up seeing tickets for that Graham Hancock Zahi Hawass debate tour of 2015, and I thought, well, why not? And I have history with Zahi and actually from with Graham from a long time ago, in the mid 90s when Graham's book had come out. I had happened to stop at a bookstore and saw Graham's book, hadn't heard anything about it, went, oh, that looks interesting, and picked it. I just couldn't put it down, just couldn't stop reading it. And
Is that
about
Fingerprints of the Gods?
Fingerprints of the Gods, and
Yeah, it's
about
really interesting.
it's a great book, and about so much, really a lot of dense research, very factual, really easy to get stuck into. And about 2 months after I read that book, I was going to UCLA for recording engineering, and there was a lecture at UCLA on Egypt, like a 3-day lecture given by the director of antiquities, Dr. Zahi Hawass. And I thought, and it was quite pricey, especially for me at the time, but I thought, wow, I was so fired up about this book. And I thought, very naively, I thought, how exciting, all this new work and these new theories, and this is, they've got to be really excited about this. It's got to really bring some life back into Egyptology. And so that was my introduction to how academia works and the resistance there. And I asked 3 questions in those lectures of Zahi, and he just screamed at me the whole time. I mean, I'm glad I was sitting in like the 15th row, because the guys in the first 3 rows were getting spit on. He was so angry. And the first question I asked him was very basic. It was just like, look, all of these pyramids that we found, even the ones that, haven't been broken into in the past, there haven't been any bodies in them. Like, how is it that we're so sure that they're tombs? I'm not even saying to him, they're not tombs, dude. I'm not even going. I'm just saying, how is it that you've reached this conclusion when, and he took that and twisted it into that I was accusing him of stealing all these things from the pyramid. And
Really?
it just went, and it went south from there. And it actually wasn't until the Hawass tour when another Egyptologist told me that he had actually been busted for
Oh.
laundering money through the Cairo Museum gift shop. And I can say this like over the air because it was actually reported in Smithsonian magazine before the revolution. He was accused, indicted, tried, convicted, and sentenced to prison for
Wow.
that. And then the revolution happened, and whew, it all just went away. There was also the money he was taking from Nat Geo and the thing. And that's why he's no longer in his position out in the limelight, but he's still around. So I had an idea of what that what that tour was kind of going to be like, but I was really interested to to go and see and experience it. And Graham's a lovely guy, and he was very personable. But we got there, and Zahi, the first day, he only was with the group for 2 days, the day of the lecture and the first day. But he came out under the Sphinx and immediately started shouting about how we were all idiots. Now, this is 70 people who'd paid over $5,000 to be on this tour, but we were all idiots because we believed in aliens, and Atlantis, and he hadn't read any of these books because he already knew everything and he didn't need to read any of these books. And then he passed out this thing, this 5-page printed booklet, just absolutely savaging Dr. Robert Schoch for his geological
Mm-hmm.
assertions. Not even calling him Dr. Schoch, just referring to him as Schoch, like through the whole thing. And then we were told like we couldn't show that to anybody. The whole thing was just weird from day one. And then we had the trip, and then the debate at the end, where before the debate he just refused to do the debate and walked out, said he wasn't going to do it, and threw his toys, out of the pram and was shouting. And I think the tour company had to say, look, we've paid you. You're going to have to like give us the money back or something, because he finally said, okay, I won't debate him. I won't listen to him, but I will come in after and I will give my presentation. And so Graham gave his, which was very articulate and well thought out. And then Zahi came in and gave his presentation, and I was stunned. I should have known better, but it was very clear that he had no intention of debating Graham Hancock from the very beginning, because his presentation was the same presentation that I saw in Los Angeles in 1996 or 7, which was essentially an updated version, which is essentially, here's me with Princess Diana standing in front of the pyramid. Here's me with Obama in front of the pyramid. Here's me kicking Beyonce off of the site because I didn't like her. I mean, really, and literally, that's what all. Here's me crawling out of this hole. Here's me. I discovered this, and that's all it was. There was no other. There's no real information. There was no reference to any of the geology or any of the science.
Yeah.
And so that's just kind of how it went. And when we were allowed to ask him questions, we'd say, well, so how did they align, the pyramids to within like 1/60th of a degree of true north? And his answer would be stuff like, oh, it's a national project. Everybody comes together for a national project, and anything is possible. That was literally the answer that he gave us. And he kept saying, if Egypt is so much older than 5,000 years, show me these other civilizations that are older. And we said, well, what about Göbekli Tepe? And his response was, what is this Göbekli Tepe you speak of? He had no knowledge or awareness of Göbekli Tepe. And when we said, well, it was buried 12,000 years ago, so it's at least that. Oh no, you must be wrong. Your dates are all wrong. And another Egyptologist on the stage had to tell him actually that was correct. And so it was just that kind of. And I thought, there's just room for more people to come in here and just open people's minds up. And I'm not trying to. I have no interest in taking anything away from Egypt or from any ancient culture. In any way, if it turns out that the Egyptian civilization as we know it didn't build the Sphinx, didn't build the Great Pyramids, it doesn't really take much away from that civilization. It's still an absolutely incredible culture and an incredible civilization. There's nothing really to be lost there, but there's definitely an academic thing that's going on. Behind
What
the
do the
scenes.
locals say about, because Brian says that a lot. Instead of telling the story for the people, just ask the natives. What do the natives say about who built the pyramids? Because there's obviously that debate if it's dynastic or pre-dynastic, and obviously, I mean, all the theories. But what do the people say?
It depends who you talk to. I mean, you have the Egyptologists who will argue day and night that the step pyramid is a symbolic stairway to heaven and all this stuff, which is just nonsense. And you can explain to them, they don't understand. And then a lot of the local people just they know what they've learned in school. And so Khufu built this pyramid and Khafre built that one, and then some of them are sort of brought up in that sort of Sufi heritage where they're taught some of these other things. And Yusuf is one of those guys. His father was a Sufi indigenous wisdom keeper, Hakim Abdel Oyen. And these were the things that were passed down, and I think they pick a son and they pass it on, and that's just sort of how it works. And his timeline and his stories and ideas are very different from the academic storyline, and Egypt goes back much further. But that's not really shocking. I mean, if we look at Manetho and some of the other histories that we ignore in favor of Herodotus, etc., the timeline does go back much further. And I think really for me, these are the options that we have to look at. Because I went back in 2015. I thought, look, this is going to be fun, but I went with the mindset of I was prepared to go there and find that actually, the dynastic Egyptians really did do all this stuff the way the Egyptologists said at the time, that they said it. I was prepared for that. And when I got there, I was just constantly surprised by the amount of evidence to the contrary that's just, laying around.
Yeah, I agree.
And when you find the people who are, walking around and looking at that stuff and who don't just default to whatever answer was in their textbook, you start to get some really interesting, questions about who was really doing that and what was going on. And the tentative theory or conclusion that I've reached at this point is that we've misidentified the fourth dynasty. That fourth dynasty that did all this really superb monolithic, megalithic stuff, the stuff where all the columns are one piece, even though they're 150 feet high and weigh 1,000 tons. This dynasty, this fourth dynasty, that didn't have the tools to quarry granite and yet was pulling giant blocks out from 11 to 15 meters deep inside the granite quarries.
It's so crazy.
I mean, it really is. What they were able to achieve doesn't make sense. And I think Hancock put it very well when he talks about how the Egyptian civilization, as it's presented by historians today, starts like 15 minutes before its peak. And then it peaks, and then it's got like 4,000 years of decline. And that's just not how things work. And when we start to look at the Younger Dryas event and sites like Gunung Padang, which may be incredibly old, and Göbekli Tepe, which we know is incredibly old, I think it just opens the door to understanding that we've been rebooted a couple times here in the past. Probably within the last 150,000 years, we've been rebooted a couple of times. And it may well be that we spent a few thousand years becoming extremely good at stonework and other things, and then we're wiped out again and started again. And I think
So you believe in the cataclysm, every 1,000 years.
It makes the most sense to me. I mean, I don't think it's even. I don't think it's like, every 12,000 years it happens or something. But, it's more random than that. But yeah, I think it happens all the time. And, we know things get wiped out, but it's not just like once 65 million years ago. This is like all the time. And, we've had a pretty good run of it for the last, 12,000 years, but it could happen again tomorrow. Yeah. And if it did happen again, and 0.1% of the human race survived after a couple of years, imagine trying to tell your grandkids about jet airplanes and Skype and all these things that no longer exist. By the time your grandkids are the elders, it's all going to be fantasy. And everything that we build nowadays, cement and steel, within a few thousand years, that is, you're not even going to find a trace of it. And I think, when you look at the stuff that's been found off the coast of India, there's stuff that's been underwater for at least 9,000 years. These are megalithic blocks that form a city that's like 5 miles long. So there's
nobody talks about that either.
Nobody really talks.
And nobody asks these questions because you know what it is. And I've never been to the pyramids, and I'm hoping to go very soon, because this amazes me. The stones at Baalbek, for example. That's another place that's like, how that quarry in China.
Yes, the Yangshan quarry.
Yes, that's You know,
Do you know what their story is for that?
no, what is it?
It's hysterical. The story is that about 600
There's
years
mole
ago,
people.
yeah, they decided 600 years ago that they wanted to build a giant dragon for their emperor. So they were going to make this dragon out of three pieces. So they carved it in three pieces and then realized they couldn't move it, so they abandoned it.
Wow,
That's the official story.
that's crazy.
There's
But
no way any stonemason with
it's
any
gonna
kind of
ban.
credibility is going to do
Yeah,
that much work and then go, wait a second, how are we going to lift this?
yeah. Unless they were wiped out while doing it. You know,
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
I talked to my fiance about this kind of stuff, and I'm like, this is crazy. You know, every time I learn something new, either watching, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I'll read books about different things, and it's one of the things on this podcast I talk about pretty much everything, and I break down religion, this sort of stuff, life, all kinds of things, and I will share this knowledge with her, and she'll be like, yeah, that's cool. I'm like, cool? Don't people know how ginormous? You know what? The Great Pyramid of Giza, 13-acre footprint, more than 2.3 to 2.5 million stones, and
Yeah.
some of them weighing up to 80 tons. You know what that is? You know what I mean? Like, how did these people? Yeah, but that's the thing. People don't understand how big it is because you see these these videos up close. Video is one thing, and then you see these pictures of the person that's tiny.
Hmm.
A zoomed out picture of the person is tiny next to this, and it really makes you see the scale of how big and how vast. And again, not only that, what amazes me is the precision that these people were able to accomplish that. And
Yeah.
I do CNC work. I know a lot about metallurgy. I know about different harnesses. I know about different cutters. Using carbide, using high-speed steel, all these
Mm.
different uh, cutting techniques. And when you look at some of these statues, in the
Oh,
Ramesseum, I think it
yeah.
is where you see almost like milling marks. It's
Oh,
crazy. It's
and
amazing.
you should come with Yusuf and I one time because we'll take you through the museum and show you all of the really old statues that have power tool marks on them. And it's unreal
Wow.
because like this is not a chisel, it's a continuous line.
Mhm.
They've gone too far with it, and
Evenly spaced, and
it's
it's
usually, yeah, like the sitting ones, it's like usually like under the thigh or the butt, like they've come down and they've just taken whatever this s- like rotating saw is, and it's just gone just a little too far. And you see this like
oh, I
these
got
marks on
you.
these statues, like, and quite a few of them, and it's absolutely crazy. And
Well, where are their tools, Luke? That's what I've always wondered. We have all these places, and then
mhm,
where are the tools? They obviously they found different things, but another thing that blows my mind is that we're looking for all these answers. We're looking for all we're asking all these questions, and 85% of Egypt is still under the sand
under the
in the
sand.
bedrock.
Yep.
So it's like maybe you're looking for this missing piece of the puzzle and it's right there, but
Yep.
again, you have that conflict from the government, conflict from academia, because they don't want to have to go back and rewrite. George Orwell, 1984, they love doing that. They
I
went
keep
back and
uh,
they would change it and be like, no, 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 we were right, you can go ahead and check back.
I keep asking because I'm always curious what is the reason for that? Because I mean you're quite right. Only 15% of Egypt has been excavated.
That's
The
amazing.
sites, and
Imagine the things.
including the Giza plateau.
Wow.
And it's really frustrating sometimes actually to walk over that stuff and know that you could be standing like 15 feet over
Oh,
the most incredible thing that, has never been seen in thousands of years.
yeah.
And like you don't have any idea.
Or you don't have access to it. Do you think they're
And you don't
hiding
have
things,
access.
Luke? All these places, and then you have people. Obviously, we're gonna talk about the kooks. You have people like Eric von Daniken and stuff that talk about all these crazy these crazy theories.
I liked Von Daniken simply for what he did with Chariots of the Gods. He was
Hmm.
willing to ask the questions. Wait a second. What, let's just take a look at this. I know what you say, but this looks like this. And I think they're questions that are worth asking. And like for me, I don't think the aliens built any of this stuff. I believe aliens exist. I think it's a mathematical certainty. You look at the amount of stars just in our galaxy. It's an absolute certainty. They're out there, and I don't believe that travel is actually restricted to like physical getting in a vehicle and going somewhere. I
Hmm.
think once we understand how the universe works, that none of that stuff is going to be necessary. So could they come here if they knew we were here and blah blah blah? And yeah, I'm sure they could. And have they been here? Probably. And they're probably still here. This is probably vacation. Like they probably put on human suits and just check shit out. I mean,
They're reptilians. They morph
right.
into humans.
Why not? I don't. But as far as the pyramids, Pumapunku, all these various places, I see mistakes is what I see, and a lot of stuff. I see error, and I see physical tools that leave marks.
Hmm.
And I think if these guys are like opening portals or rematerializing or doing whatever it is that they can, they would have this stuff. There wouldn't be any mistakes. There wouldn't be any of these kind of weird tool marks. It would just be done.
Yeah, yeah, I
And
got you.
I don't know. Again, and this is the thing. Like I should have said this at the beginning because anything I say, I don't try to tell people I'm right. I don't believe that I know more necessarily than anybody else. You should treat everything I say as a well-meaning lie, and you should go out and look into yourself and come to your own conclusions. But
That's what I always tell people,
yeah,
even when it comes, I talk about conspiracy theories, but I forgot what quote it is. I have it somewhere. It's like, a wise man can accept ideas without actually believing them,
yeah, you can
something like that.
hold an idea in your head and consider it without
Mhm.
necessarily having to believe it's true or,
But
or
people have a
false.
problem with that. So I tell them the same exact thing that you said, find out for yourself. I'm only a messenger, uh, theology fascinates me, and I'll have conversations with people and break down, a certain religion. If it doesn't fit the views of theirs, they get offended at me. And they're like, no, that's not how it is. Like, well, whoa, dude, I'm just telling, I mean, we're having a conversation. I'm telling you, from my experience, what I know about this, if that's their belief, doesn't mean I believe it. And there's just a lot of conflict, and I've always wondered why. Why is this such a big thing? It may and it puts it out there like maybe they are hiding something, or they don't want to admit that they're wrong, or whatever it is. But it just leads me to believe that they are hiding something. Like you can't go to certain places, and then they're making. Do you know how much do you know about the new pyramid that they just opened up? Have you seen the news on that?
Um, the Lahoon pyramid that they opened? Is
The
that
one
that's
It
or the
was a
Bent pyramid?
I
Or
don't
are we
even
talking
know.
about a new pyramid that they found?
They opened it up
No.
recently.
Yeah, okay. So they recently they opened down in Hawara, the
They found a
pyramid of La
princess.
of Lahoon. That I'm not a lot of the middle and older kingdom stuff, and it's terrible. And I give myself a hard time about this all the time. I'm really interested in the fourth dynasty and the super early stuff and the stuff that we're struggling to explain.
Yeah.
And so when they find beautiful mummified boxes from the 23rd dynasty, I'm like, that's cool, but I really don't care. And it's terrible. Because I find myself in Egypt a lot of times, and I'm in an incredible place like Karnak or Luxor, and I'm actually doing a video on Karnak right now, and there are interesting uh, uh, in sort of inexplicable things at Karnak or things that need explaining. But like I look at all the sectioned columns where they've built all the columns and sections, and I know how they built the pylons and all that stuff, and it's all like there's no mystery to it. It's not the stuff I'm really interested in, and I have to actually make myself stop and appreciate it a little more,
Yeah.
just because of that. But
It's
so like,
incredible. I mean, no matter how you put it, and even not just the Egyptians, the Romans as well too.
mm,
They made beautiful,
oh, absolutely,
beautiful architecture. And what you were saying before about if there is a cataclysm and something comes through, nothing, not even, concrete or all this stuff is going to be standing. But imagine these things have stood
Yeah.
for thousands and thousands of years. And even, yeah, it's academia. When I was in school, I remember there would be like, and the shaft is for the pharaoh to be able to descend with the spirit up to the gods. And now I look back on it, I'm like, I really believe that.
Well, it's the funny thing is you rarely find anybody in academic circles who's willing to say they don't know. And one of the reasons for that is what I've run into, because I say I don't know a lot and I try to keep things open on my tours and on my in my videos and stuff. And what that actually does is it summons uh, these people who know everything to come and tell you like what everything,
Yeah.
and you're like, okay, no, this is crazy. So there's definitely that aspect of things which is really can be really frustrating when people know stuff and they're not willing to be open about it. But
So so what out of
but
all
to
the
go back,
places?
I want to answer your question really really quickly if I can about the pyramids that just opened, because they
Yeah.
just opened the Bent Pyramid for the first time in, I don't know, 40 or more years.
Was it open
And
already though?
no,
Before?
no, it was, they were doing repairs in there. It wasn't really in very good. It wasn't safe internally for
Mm.
people to be coming in, and they needed to put lights and other stuff in there. And I had the opportunity to go in there a couple years ago, and ended up not being able to because the minister showed up at the site right before we were about to go in. But I went in this year, and it's incredible. It's incredible pyramids. Very very cool pyramid inside, but
Yeah.
very interesting too because um, and even Ahmed Fakhri, the Egyptologist back in the 30s, 40s, when they were working inside that pyramid, excuse me, he was blown away because when they started to open it up, before they had even discovered like the west shaft, somehow the wind used to come into that pyramid, and it used to. There's a really weird passage up at the top that's like almost like an elephant's trunk or a snake. And the wind comes in through these passages, and it comes in through that passage, and it makes these really weird sounds. And it doesn't do it anymore because they filled in a lot of the stuff with rubble, you know. And this is one of the things they do. They're like, oh, that must be a shaft for when they just throw all the detritus and stuff, and it just drives me crazy.
Yeah, they're destroying, history pretty much, or like even when they rebuild it and stuff like that.
One of the things that really upset me actually recently, I was under the step pyramid last year with Yusuf. I got a video coming out on that soon, and they have all these because under the pyramid of Zoser, they found 40,000, 50,000 jars and bowls made out of extremely hard stone. We're talking breccia, porphyr, corundum, stuff that like you really would need either that material itself or diamond, to cut it. And yet these things have like fluted necks and holes through the little handles that are like a sewing needle that's gone through something we'd have to cut through diamond, but it's like a hole the size of like a sewing, like you pushed a sewing needle through that.
Wow.
And the inside, even though the neck is like the size of a nickel to a quarter, the inside is completely hollowed out. And this is really hard stone. And they found like 40,000 of these things under Zoser Step Pyramid. And it's just clear to me. They
You
say
don't
that
hear
this
about
is,
that?
you don't hear much about it, but they say that these are from the Archaic Age, so the pre-dynastic times. Well, who the hell in pre-dynastic times is cutting through corundum like butter at like 40,000 times? And it's just clear to me that these things were collected and stashed under there. They were inherited, like a lot of other stuff was inherited and kept and treasured as coming from, undoubtedly what they thought of as, Zep Tepi the first time, when the gods walked, when we could build structures like this, when we could make things like this, when they knew how to do that. And you see that like time and again. And what really upset me was being under that pyramid and last year, and they have fragments of those bowls still in there that have like the saucer mark, like in the bottom of the broken uh, thing where like the tube drill has come through and made like a saucer mark on the
Yeah.
bottom, and there's pieces of that and the curve on them, and it's just, and pieces of interlocking alabaster. I mean, I have video of these things that have um, like a wide triangle with a very narrow top. I can't describe this very well. And then they've got another piece that slots into the gap around that, like like tongue and groove, but it's in
Yeah.
alabaster and it's like 5,000-6,000 years old. Like, who is doing this? And so when I saw use of this at the very end of last year, and we were talking about stuff, and he says like, I got some bad news. And I'm like, what? He's like, you remember all that stuff that we were looking through? And I was like, oh yeah, yeah. He's like, they took all of that stuff out of the pyramid before, because they're getting ready to open the step pyramid, and they've been doing a lot of work down there. He said they took all of that stuff out with all of the new stuff that they've been, repairing down there, and they pushed it all in a hole together and
Wow.
just filled it in.
That stuff is priceless.
It's that stuff to me is so precious, and I left it there. Like, if I knew they were just going to bury that in a pit with a bunch of modern building supplies, I would have like started giving that stuff out as gifts to people. Look what I brought you from Egypt,
Yeah.
That stuff to me is just, and I understand they got
It's kind of
40,000 of those
disgusting.
things in good shape in a museum. How much more of this stuff do we need? But on the other hand, I'm like, all of it. Like,
Yeah, it's disgusting. It really is. I
yeah.
mean, but again, that George, go back to George Orwell, that quote he says, "Those who control the future control the past, and those who control the
Mhm.
past control the future." It's just like that. You can see it.
It's
Um,
it's actually uncanny how accurate Orwell was in a lot of ways.
I saw a meme today that said, "When are we gonna switch this over to the nonfiction section?"
Yeah, right. I have a shirt that says "Make Orwell Fiction Again."
Yeah, because hey, I mean, we're seeing that every day.
Uh,
So speaking of the pyramids,
mm,
when you go inside the Great Pyramid of Giza,
yeah.
um, can you tell me what the energy in there is like? Because obviously, they thought that they were these big uh, energy generators. Almost, that's why Nikola Tesla was so
Yeah.
obsessed with the pyramids, because there were these ancient power plants, and they're aligned in a certain way in the world to be able to pick up the energy, and there's different points around the world,
Yep.
and that's they say that it was they had a big network of pyramids. What's it like when you go in there? Do you feel something different? The energy, the vibration, the harmonics, what's that like?
These structures are energetic, and I don't know for sure what these things were. I believe they had an actual physical function in this realm, in this
Oh no, Luke,
dimension.
they were tombs. Okay, that's
Well, and if
that's what we believe.
right, and going in the Great Pyramid, I've been in there. I've had private entrances. We try to do private entrances on our tour to as many places as possible, so you can have that experience. And so I've sat in the three chambers that they'll allow you in on a special permission. They don't allow you into the relieving chambers, but you can go into the others. Um, and it's intense. It's really, it's very intense, and it's thick. It's a very, the air is really thick in there. I can't really explain it, but some of the people on my last tour, I'd actually met in Peru, and I'd sat in, ayahuasca circle with some of these people, and they were like, "We need to do ayahuasca in here." I'm like, I think that's a really bad idea. There's no bathrooms. I don't know where I'm going to vomit. But I understood what they were saying, and what they were saying is, like, the energy here is so intense that, you know, opening or thinning the veil anymore would be just so interesting. But I don't even think the Great Pyramid is the most energetic site there, by a long way. But it's definitely,
Which do you
It's
believe
definitely worth
is?
visiting and going in. It's a toss-up for me in Egypt. I would have to say Abu Jarab, and
Yeah,
probably
can we talk about that? I know that's one of your favorites. That's where the
yeah, we could.
bulls are, right?
Yeah, that's where the bulls are. That and Abu Ruwash. And that's another interesting site because it's like a twin with Zayat El Aryan, which is the one that's buried on the military base that no one will ever get to see. And had some interesting stories told to me about those as well. But yeah, Abu Jarab is it's supposedly a sun temple, um, sixth dynasty, and it was a small pyramid with a flat top with a massive obelisk on top of the top of that pyramid. And then in front of it, there was a huge four-sided hotep that's aligned to the cardinal directions. It's also a squaring of the circle. And then you've got what I call the Hakeem Bolter bowls, the ones that everybody's seen in the Pyramid Code documentary. But there are actually other bowls there. There's what I call the Type B bowls, which are different design. There's a bunch of those still there, and there's two of those actually still set in the floor in a little temple structure to the south of the Sun Temple. It's
And people
really
don't people don't believe those are for sacrifices, right? Because the way they're designed, it's not good for flow. But it just makes you really think, what were these people? If you could go back in time and just take a peek, you
There's
know?
another reason I don't believe they're for sacrifices, and that is that the Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians, when they were sacrificing animals, because they didn't, by the way, in case people think they're like the Aztecs and were sacrificing humans, they
These
didn't do
guys are
that.
savages.
Um, they they had these triangular stone blocks that they would tie the animals to before they were sacrificed, and you always find those at places where animals are sacrificed. There's none of those at Abu
They
Jarab.
time
So,
to what? To a
like
block?
a triangular shaped block. It's a kind of strange stone block. It's got a kind of a particular shape that they would tie the sacrificial animals to, and you would
Mm-hmm.
usually find those at sites where animals have been sacrificed. There aren't any of those at Abu Jarab, but there's lots of theory. I mean, people have come up with everything from this is where they wash their clothes to this is where they separate like the chaff
It
from the
was just a
wheat.
laundromat.
Right, it's a laundromat, or this is where they separate out the chaff from the wheat, or the grain. This is where they brewed beer. My personal feeling is that they're subfloor, that they're beneath the floor, and that there was water running beneath the floor, and that those holes were for the water flow. Because you don't have to. It's a 20-minute walk to Abu Sir, and that site has got water channels cut into the ground running underneath the whole site. That collects in these red quartzite bowls, and the Egyptologists tell you this is a sewage system. Well, you don't collect sewage in a red quartzite bowl. Like, it's just
Yeah.
ridiculous. This is either water purification or some kind of energetic empowerment of the site. Like you were talking about Tesla, he knew when he was building his Wardenclyffe Tower that if you have
Mm-hmm.
aquifers, if you have running water underneath, it greatly enhances the strength of
He
your.
was onto something, and
He
he
was on
got
this.
abruptly. And people don't, 85% of our technology, we owe it to him or something, or
Yeah, it's
95%, something
ridiculous
crazy. But
amount.
people, forget about him and they go on and think about other people. And it's like, that guy was onto something. And how he said, when science starts to look at non-physical phenomenon, they'll make, more progress, since they have in decades, paraphrasing that quote. But he really was onto something. And again, this ancient stuff, it just makes you want to pull your hair out because you just want to know so bad what that was for. And that's the fun part about it, that it makes you really think. um
Well, somebody posted, and this is just a weird thing. Somebody posted on their Facebook page a while back. One of my friends posted like a wacky patents post, like a bunch of things that people actually have patents for. And I was sitting in an airport, so I was, I thought, okay, so I'm like thumbing through this, and all of a sudden I get to this point where there's a patent for a personal teleporter. And so I'm reading this, and
Nikola Tesla.
the requirements are, large granite obelisks with,
Really?
with gold or electrum or something like at the tip, and you got to put them like this. And I'm like, geez, I wonder where there's a lot of large granite obelisks kind of
Oh
lying
yeah.
around that nobody knows what, because this is the funny thing in Egypt. We look at this stuff, and even, I mean, the canny Egyptologists know, almost everything is dated by what's written on it. And what's written on it almost always comes hundreds, if not thousands of years later. And so I think as we look at it, there's a very good possibility that our civilization goes back. We chose to go with Herodotus' story. And there are scholars out there who've written books who believe that Herodotus never even visited Egypt.
Yeah, I've
So we're
seen that
talking about,
argument as well.
yeah, so we're talking about a guy who lived, 2,000 years after the pyramids were supposedly built, but maybe more, and who, potentially never went there. And this is a guy collecting, essentially kind of collecting stories in ports and bars and wherever, from travelers about. And we take his word for it. And Manetho, who was the high priest at Heliopolis, who actually lived 200 years after Herodotus, who read Herodotus's work and went, "This is bullshit." And I have access to all of the texts that prove that and what our history is. And I'm going to put it all in a book, and I'm going to write it. And we think he actually wrote 8 books, but there's only fragments of a couple of his books that survive, and they come through other historians,
Is that the
Josephus,
one that
Eusebio,
the
Africanus.
Caliph or something like that?
What's that?
Is that the one that writes about the Caliph or
I'm not
or
sure if
no?
I'm not sure what he says about the caliph, but he does say that the king list goes back thousands of years further
Hmm.
than we've discredited everything that comes before a certain point because we don't like it. It doesn't
Hmm.
sound right to us. And that's because a lot of the rulers have extremely long lifespans. It's the same thing that you find in Sumeria.
Hmm.
You've got gods and demigods who are ruling, and sometimes they rule for 7,000 years. And Egyptologists didn't like that. So they turned around and said, Manetho wasn't talking about um, solar years here. He was talking about lunar years. Now, he never said he was talking about lunar years,
Yeah.
um, which is a month, right? Uh, he did, and everything else that he ever talks about, they use solar years. But for this, they decided to go back and break down all those lifetimes as if each
Mm.
solar year was just a month. And you still end up with guys who ruled for 800 or 900 years. So they just got rid of all of it. They went, we
So
can't
still
have it.
doesn't make sense. See that's a then you go that's when it's a wormhole, dude.
Yeah.
And that's when you fall into the, these that's why they talk about the ancient aliens and the Anunnaki and all these different things and it's like what is happening? It's a brain melt. But it's incredible. Earlier you mentioned ayahuasca.
Mm.
Can we talk a little bit about what your findings are with psychedelics and these ancient civilizations? Because we know the Egyptians, they viewed higher consciousness and as a sacred
Yeah.
thing. And what have you found on that?
Well, I believe that the Egyptians were using sacraments. Um, they had access to Harmala Paganum, which would be a very ayahuasca-ish experience. It's basically an analog. And they, of course, had Blue Lotus, which there are very old scenes all over tomb walls of the use and ingestion of Blue Lotus. And I believe it's debated. I believe they had marijuana. Um, and there are histories of them growing mushrooms on certain kinds of grain. There's a certain kind of psychedelic grain mushroom, but
Hmm.
I've been trying to actually really track that down, and I'm having some troubles. But anyway, I think a lot of what they're talking about and expressing in a lot of their texts is quite visionary. I think they were trying to make my personal belief is that they were trying to make sense of something they didn't completely understand, and that's not like us now trying to make sense of existence, which we don't completely understand. I think they were trying to do that, but I think they were trying to make sense of what they inherited. I don't think they entirely understood what they inherited, and I think they created sort of an entire history and religion and way of life around that, in an attempt to do that. I'm sure that's an extremely unpopular opinion or thought. As far as learning stuff about ancient cultures with visionary plant substances, that's actually one of the reasons I decided to do ayahuasca. I'm not even sure if I should really, but we can make a decision about it. I'm going to tell you at least some of this story, and then we can decide later whether to cut it out.
Oh, let me take the timestamp. Hold on.
All right.
53:05. Go ahead.
All right. So the first time I ever smoked NN-DMT, actually the only time I ever smoked NN-DMT, was in Egypt on that Hancock tour. One of the people who'd come had actually brought it for Graham because they knew, that he was into that stuff. And so they brought him this, the DMT, and they offered it to him, I think, on the second to last night. And I happened to be with the guy when he offered it to Graham. And Graham, he'd had kind of a rough trip. His hip was bothering him. He was really looking forward to a rest. It was right after the debate, and he was not down for it. And I think people do this to him a lot. When he goes to talk places, people bring him, sacraments.
Drugs.
Let's do this, Graham. And I can.
I wouldn't accept any drugs from a random stranger.
It'd be a bit weird. I, however, did accept it from him. So he asked me after Graham said no. He said, well, and it just seemed like the right time. We've been talking a lot about ayahuasca on that trip, and I thought, why not? And I had a very strange experience because I was expecting to have an entirely Egyptian experience. I'd been there for a month because I was there for a couple of weeks before the Hancock tour with Yusuf, crawling into anywhere I could crawl into, and I was really expecting to have a very strong Egyptian experience. And I inhaled the 3 lung filling tokes, and it was like these fractal curtains just came down from either side, and then I was just in this other dimension. And there was an Indian guy, I figure is Brahma now. Looking back on it, I figure it's Brahma, sitting on a lotus leaf that he was just zooming around on and laughing like this was just the greatest thing. And here I was, he made it, and look at this, isn't this hilarious? And he's just really enjoying himself on his lotus, and I am blown away because the amount of detail to everything is just stunning. And you can zoom in, you can just zoom in as close as you want, or pull all the way out. You can, and there's no loss of, like with LSD or mushrooms or something, you look at something, it kind of changes as you're looking at it, but it's still the same thing, but it's sort of changing, but like the base thing is always kind of there. And this is not like that at all. Everything was extremely sharp. I've never seen anything like that anywhere else. And after a moment or two of watching all of this, all of a sudden I was in the jungle, and it was absolutely the Amazon. There's no two ways about it. There were all these pyramids. I was watching them. I could see faces carved into the pyramids. Energy seemed to be coming down the corners, not down like the centers, but down the corners. And it occurred to me in that moment with absolute belief that the Mesoamerican cultures who were building those pyramids because they were in contact with an extra dimensional place that they visited by ingesting these sacraments, and they were either copying what they saw there, or they'd been instructed to come back and build this stuff here. And after that, I sort of came back into my body a bit, and I took a breath, and I thought, oh, I'm going to go out on the balcony. And it was very interesting because I could still see the jungle, but I could also see my room, and they were not aligned the same way on the same plane. So it was like walking was like being on a ship in a storm. Anyway, I got out to the balcony, and there was this yellow and blue road that came down out of the sky and just sort of landed on the ground outside of my balcony. And there were these little creatures jumping off of the bridge into the trees and just having a great time. And while I'm watching this, I saw like something really bright in the sky caught my attention. I thought obviously it was going to be the sun, but I could see the two Great Pyramids from my balcony. And as I turned to look at it, there was a giant blue being standing over the pyramids, which would have been about waist high to him, maybe a little lower even. And he was crouching as if he was on a surfboard or a skateboard, the one leg forward, the other leg back, and he had his left palm over the top of the Great Pyramid and his right palm over the top of the second pyramid. And between his hands and the top of the pyramids, there were these incredible spinning golden discs of light. And all around these spinning discs of light, you could see the fabric of existence, like raveling and unraveling, knitting and unknitting, all around these golden discs. And it was absolutely fascinating. It was so compelling. I wanted to look at his face, and it took every ounce of my willpower to look away from his hands and look at his face. And when I looked at his face, he was looking at me, and he was smiling, and he would look at me and then look at his hands and then look back at me and look at his hands with this expression on his face like, is that fucking wild? And I was sitting there like, yes, that absolutely is the most incredible thing I've ever seen. And I just stood there on my balcony and watched this being harness energy over the top of the pyramids and then fade out. And then I just stood there and I was like, is he there all the time and I can't see him? Is that what these things are? Do all these structures exist in multiple dimensions at once? Do they have a use and a function in every dimension? Are they broken in some dimension and the most incredible device in another dimension? Like, I don't know the answer to any of these questions. People say that DMT is the imagination drug, and you imagine everything. But if I was going to imagine something, it would have been Egyptian. I mean, I just know how I work. I would have had this incredible Egyptian imagination experience, and I didn't. And here's something else that I'll tell you. The face, and I was entirely unfamiliar with Mesoamerican. So I'd been to a couple pyramids in Belize just on holiday, but I'd never been to Mexico. I'd never seen any of the pyramid. The face that I saw on that pyramid was Tlaloc, the god of rain. I'd never seen Tlaloc's face before.
Really?
Yeah. So to answer
From Mesoamerica.
From Mesoamerica. So to answer your question, there is information that can be attained in these other places. Whether it's correct.
Akashic records, man.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
I talked to a shaman. I talked to a Huachimero in Peru about this because this guy he used to lead what he called Chavin Renaissances. And he would take people up to Chavin Temple in northern Peru and dose them with Huachuma, the old style, and, walk them through their experience in the temple and around, the land zone and that land up there. And you asked me about energetic places. Apart from Abu Jarab, I mean, that is the most energetic place.
What they call a Temple of Doom?
It's I don't know if it's doom, but it's a temple of something. And and it's very interesting because they use all the jungle iconography, even though it's in the high mountains.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And they had pilgrimages going to that site from all over Peru, thousands and thousands of years ago, to drink Huachuma and whatever else they may have been drinking up there.
And that's a hallucinogenic cactus, correct?
Yes, we call it San Pedro.
Yes.
It's actually legal. I think you can go to a garden nursery and buy San Pedro cactus if you so desire.
They brew it, and you drink it?
Yeah, I think everybody, I think because a long time ago I actually made some from San Pedro cactus, but the stuff that I had in Peru was absolutely ridiculous. Lasted for about 18 hours. It was relentless.
Wow.
We did like 4 days of that, and went out in the jungle and visited tribes, and it was really intense.
And you
But
just smoked while doing all this?
no, you just you drink it, and it's so, because there's bits of the cactus. It's really slimy, and it's so. I did 8 days of that after 8 days of ayahuasca, and it was quite brutal actually, in a lot of ways, because the ayahuasca manages somehow to taste more vile every subsequent time. I think I've drunk ayahuasca 11, 12 times, and
Wow.
every time it's harder than it was the time before to get it down.
And
It's
that first DMT experience, that was your first time doing smoking it, but then
Yeah,
you
that's actually, I mean, I have since done 5-MeO DMT, but that's the only time I've ever done NN DMT.
what
Um,
oh, you got the other strand of it.
NN DMT is the stuff that Terence McKenna is always talking about, the machine
Mm.
elves. It's a very active environment. There's entities there. They're usually aware of you and they'll interact with you.
Is
Um,
that's what you saw because they looked at you?
yes. Yeah. Oh,
It's an incredible experience. Like you
yeah.
were blowing my mind while I'm telling you. It's
I,
like
I,
what? That's
so,
so
this stuff, and I,
insane.
I have to be careful because this stuff, it feeds into what I'm doing. And then,
An
I want
unbiased opinion.
I want to believe that, that's what really is, that there's that guy in another dimension. He's there all the time doing that stuff. And it's the same way. It's like I have some outlandish ideas about stuff. It's just that I'm not really gonna, I'd like to have a little bit of, proof, something I could really
Yeah.
show people, to
Well,
say.
it's up for interpretation, and that's like that comes with anything in life,
Yeah.
whether it be theology or life itself, the way you interpret it is the way you there's no right thing because at the end of the day we don't know that, we don't in space we don't know, what's out there. They throw out all these numbers, how do you even comprehend one light year being 7 trillion miles? I can't from here where I'm at to New York it's 1,000. 7 trillion, how do you even
I
begin
know.
to comprehend that? Oh, back 150 million years or whatever it is, like how do you even know? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's pretty
um
intense stuff.
it's incredible. So I believe, and now we're seeing this shift. I did an episode with a friend of mine who's a psychedelic consultant, and
Mm,
he's going to be a therapist and stuff like that. And we talked about the awakening of humanity and how psychedelics and all these sacred plants are going to start getting accepted because it's not only the healing properties of it, but the the I don't even know how to explain it. Just these
yeah,
aspects of opening
it's
up your
the
consciousness and,
yes,
and just expanding your mind,
it's an
and it comes
evolutionary process, I
it
think.
comes from the world. It's a gift from Mother Nature, and again, it's sacred, and that's why I don't believe in recreational use. I believe in
Yeah,
using it to for
absolutely.
enlightenment and creative processes. You know what I mean? But people who do it every day, I feel that they lose respect for it, and it loses you know, its sacredness in a way. Uh, Incredible stuff though.
And I will say that ayahuasca, like if you're wanting to, I don't recommend anybody does anything. You do what you think you need to do. But if somebody's listening to this going, I want information on something, and DMT, I think, is the way to do it. I would
If you don't
say,
believe in God, you'll believe in God.
I would say that the DMT, the sub NN-DMT, is probably the way to go, because I thought that's how it was going to be with ayahuasca. I had other stuff I wanted to work on, but also, I was gonna pin some of those spirits down. All right,
Yeah.
tell me about these pyramids. So let's talk pyramids. And that's not how ayahuasca works. It's very different from NN-DMT, and ayahuasca is she just wants to
Oh,
right your
you thought
ship.
smoking it and
I
ingesting it were the same thing.
Well, it's not that I thought it was the same thing, but I thought that I would be able to go into the jungle and drink ayahuasca And in that state, I would be able to go, right now, show me stuff about the like
Oh, I
because I
got
didn't
you.
even really do that with, I did.
It's on demand.
Intent is important when you go into something. And before, I spent a lot of time, like before that DMT experience, thinking about what I wanted to learn. And that's always a good thing to do, I think, before you do one of these things, to ask for, what it is that you, at least you think you want to learn or gain from the experience, and then go into it with that sort of mindfulness. And so that's what I thought I was going to do in ayahuasca. With ayahuasca, part of it was, I was having trouble, with grief. Like, even though it had been 4 years at that point since my dad had died, like the grief was just getting worse all the time. It was terrible, and that, it helped me so much. I think it was like the third session or something like that, where so much stuff was shown to me about my dad and his life and where he was now, and how this is okay, and he's in the source and he's with me, and it's okay. And since then, and that did so much for me. And since then, the 5-MeO experience, because existence and death, it's stressful, all that stuff, and we don't think about it in the West. It's all brushed under the rug. We don't talk to our children about it. We try to shield them from it. We go through our lives pretending that it's not gonna happen to us. And so all that stuff is, when you get around to working it out, it's important. And 5-MeO DMT is like, it's kind of like a rocket ship into God. It's really super disconcerting until you actually have the breakthrough experience. And then it's, unbeing. It's the glory, the pure glory and pleasure and the gift of non-being. And it feels, I can't tell you how good it feels not to be. And when you come back from that experience, I mean, I generally laugh until I cry, until I laugh, because it's funny. And like, you start to understand, why the Buddha is always laughing, because actually this is all really funny. And so I'm still at the point where I need to keep checking in, because I come out of it for a while and I'm back in the world, and eventually the world starts grinding me down. I haven't broken out enough of the patterns, our social patterns, enough to hold it. But I'm getting there. It's getting so much better. And so if other things aren't working for you, it's something to consider.
Yeah. I believe, I'm a firm believer in the law of attraction. The mind is a powerful thing, and I do believe there's access to these different realms, whether it be through prayer, meditation,
And you
psychedelic.
can get there. That, and this is why when you go to India and you look on the temple walls and you see these ecstatic things, and Thailand, Cambodia, it's the same thing. You see these ecstatic body movements and poses, the apsaras, the thing,
Mm-hmm.
and then you go into a deep psychedelic state and you see the same things.
Mm-hmm.
So now, of course, the Indians had soma, they had other things, but a lot of it is also from meditation and silence and non-interaction and all of that stuff that they do to themselves, which is really, really, it sounds so easy. Don't talk to anybody for 10 days. Don't look at anybody. Don't read a book. Don't look at your phone. Don't listen to music. It's 10 days. And you think, oh yeah, it's no problem. And like day 3, you're mental. Absolutely, you're a nutcase. And so you can get there. That's the more disciplined path. A lot of us, we don't have the time. We don't have the luxury of any of this stuff. We're in this experience where we're clearly some sort of entity that is inside a vessel, and we have no real explanation for it. And we live in this society, the societal structure, where we give ourselves no time whatsoever to examine that, think about it, figure out whether there's a goal, or it's all about, being successful. And what is successful? It's about having a, nice house and money in the bank and a trophy, whatever it is. It's crazy. The
We've
latest
lost
toys.
that oneness, with Mother Nature, and that's I think Graham Hancock says that, we've lost that oneness.
Yeah,
And it's like you said, back then people were so much more connected and connected
it had to be.
to
It was all
nature.
about community. It was all about
Exactly.
community.
Exactly. And nowadays we don't have that. We have so much hostility and so much unrest around the world, and we're believing everything the media feeds us.
I
Right
think
now we have.
scientists actually put a number on it. They put a number on how many people is too many to have a community that functions in that way. And I think it
Really?
turned out to be like 110 or 115. Like the human brain can deal with like
Mm.
knowing, loving, caring, dealing with like 100 people. And like once you get beyond that, you don't give a shit. You're like, I don't
Wow.
care what happens to them. Fuck them.
Yeah,
And it's like they've done studies on it, and that's like with primates, and which is what we are.
that's incredible.
And yeah, and that's part of our deal. We're gonna have to figure out, because really it all comes down to if we look at everybody as ourself, if the conclusion that I'm tentatively running with after all of the visionary plant medicine is that we are actually the universe is actually one entity, and we are all like a self-organizing.
String theory, quantum
Yeah,
physics is trying to correlate
yeah,
consciousness and this
that's
other realm with science.
yeah, and this is the thing that like now they're looking at all this quantum entanglement, and they're like, even though these things are in totally different places, they're
And
entangled. And I'm like, yes, because we're in the same petri dish. We're all connected. We're the same thing.
and
Like
the
just because,
observer effect, that's
yes,
what
exactly.
blows my mind.
And it just makes, of course, and that's why on a certain level our science is always going to fail because we're inside the petri dish, and it's impossible. Like it's the
Nikola
observation
Tesla,
problem. Yeah,
non-physical phenomenon. Again,
yeah.
it goes back. It goes
I'm
back.
really I'm interested in Tesla for a number of reasons, but one of the things that he maintained that I find very interesting is that gravity doesn't exist and it's not a thing. And I think that's very interesting because we struggle with gravity. We don't understand it. We can't recreate it, and it entirely dominates us. And for him, for Tesla, it wasn't gravity; it was the ether. Somehow the ether generated, uh, this sort of weight and mass, and it's really interesting stuff. He was such
It
a
is.
fascinating guy. I mean, can you imagine if you could talk about time travel, put him in a room with like Da Vinci?
Wow.
Some of these guys just go, okay, guys, you've got like 3 days, figure our shit out.
Yeah.
But and
I believe there's things in science that we'll never understand. I believe there's things in the human body that we'll never understand, things that we can do, frequencies, the effect that has on us. There's so many things that we have to figure out, and then worried about having a space force. Why do we need a space force? Who are we gonna go see? And why do we need to go on Mars when we're destroying our own Earth and starving it of things? And it blows my mind, man. It really
why
does.
would your parent give you a new dog while you're killing the old one?
Exactly. It's like you see what they're doing. You see what they're doing, and it's different agenda, but
But I've relaxed. I've relaxed on it. I think it's been part of the experience is that I'm going to do what I can to make things as good as I can for everybody, but I'm just not going to stress so much because I don't. I'm I I think it would be great if we took care of everything and treated this like a new car that we wanted to keep perfectly forever. And uh, the
after those
reality
110
is,
people, Luke, that goes
yeah,
way out the window.
exactly. The reality is, I'm just looking at this as I was talking to my friend Bianca the other day, and she's like, I just want answers. And I'm like, this isn't the place for answers. This isn't where we come for answers. This is
Because
where
you
we come.
can't understand, what's that one saying? You can't understand things from the same consciousness that it was created. I think Albert Einstein said something like that.
Oh, that's
And it's like
interesting.
you have to go above, that
Mm,
consciousness. I'll have to look for the quote. I'll send it to you, but
cool.
it's like you said, this is not the place. This is
Yeah,
not
and
the place.
unfortunately, it's not, and that has all of that stuff has sort of affected like the way I've gone into the ancient culture stuff. I'm no longer looking really for the answer. I'm just looking for more because it's
Hmm.
it's fascinating. Um, but I've been working slowly on this documentary because I just sort of decided I want to do this. I'm not a filmmaker. I didn't go to school for filmmaking. Before this, I had never used any kind of editing software, and it's quite complex. And so it's it's been a really long, grueling experience in that way. And there's many aspects of the editing which is so anti-creative that I hate it, and it feels really stifling. I have to beat myself up to do it. But I'm feeling pretty good about maybe finishing this by the end of the year, but maybe more like a couple months into next year, realistically. But I'm feeling pretty good about that, and but I made a decision recently that once I've done this, I don't think I'm going to come back to this topic in a big way. I may continue to occasionally do some videos, but I'm going to move on. There's other things that I really want to do a documentary on an aspect of plant medicine, and I'm really aching to do one on homelessness because stuff is just so out of control.
In California, especially, right?
Yeah, but I mean in the United States, well, in a lot of places, and that's really bothering me. And of course, the homelessness ties into everything. It ties into like mental health and veterans and the elderly
and drugs. A lot of drugs too.
Yeah, it's all this kind of stuff, and it's just so disappointing to me how we look away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we turned a blind. I agree. We turned a blind eye to it, and it's again, it comes down to it being also a problem of people. Like you said, now you're making me think. After 110 people, I don't give a damn.
Right.
And so it just comes down to that. But the world's a crazy place, and I don't see it getting any better, whether it be biblical or not. And it sucks because, I have a son, and, what we're leaving behind for them doesn't look like it's going to be the best thing.
Nope.
And that's just how society is nowadays. But who knows? We might get wiped out before that, or we'll destroy ourselves.
It's true, but there's always an opportunity to improve things and to turn things around. And even now, in this current political environment, I was very disappointed for the UK because they had a guy there who was offering them what they need, and they declined. I think we got a guy here now too who's kind of doing the same thing, and I think a lot of people are gonna. I don't want healthcare. I find it really hard to understand. I just I've had to actually go outside the country for medical care because I needed hernia operations, and I could pay $30,000 here, or and then my insurance, which I no longer have, but when I had it, would take some of that, and I'd still end up paying 8 or 10 grand. Or I can go to an Asian country and have it done, for 2.5. And it's just crazy to me that I'm fortunate enough I could afford a plane ticket to go and like.
It's a business. It's a business, Luke.
People,
big pharma. It's disgusting.
It is. It's totally disgusting, and I just,
my father.
Reason.
My father has MS. A 30-day supply of MS medication, because there's no cure for it. There's only a treatment. $30,000, and that's on the cheaper end. For a 30-day supply, it's one shot every day. $30,000.
Staggering. It's staggering.
And you know how much it costs to make? $600, because we looked into it.
Yeah.
And it's like, really, what? So, we can wrap up on this note talking about how messed up society is, and it's all a business, and it goes back to that sacred plant medicine. I believe, what's going on right now, that coronavirus, that they were talking about how they already have a vaccine for it.
Flu.
Yeah. They already have a vaccine for it. Who knows if it's something to,
right.
They're going to sell it for an X amount of.
I know, right?
you just don't ever know. But again, at the same time, you don't know. They're giving you these figures. I don't even believe anything I see on the mainstream media or on the media period, because though, again, and it just so ironically that there's a How to Survive a Pandemic documentary on
I know.
Netflix.
I know. Do you know what's really funny is that popped up the other night, and I started it, and then I went, nope.
Yeah,
Just
how
like, okay,
ironic.
you know what?
I was looking at my fiance. I go,
I don't actually don't really want to survive one of these things. I actually live right next to a naval base. Like I wake up to the national anthem. Like I'm that close to the naval base. And I think we're like West Coast Command here. Like if North Korea nukes us, I'm going first. And I'm so okay with that. Like I don't want to be around trying to pick
yeah.
up where am I going to eat? Oh, there's a dog. Are you hungry? I'm hungry. Let's go get.
And you don't
No,
want to kill yourself
no,
either. It's like,
no.
damn.
You know. So I don't know. I just it can be a very cruel world. It's also an incredibly beautiful place, and that's what it comes down to is we can choose to treat each other with kindness and respect. And if we all did that, if we all decided to just do that for a week, right, for the next week,
I think the world would implode on
it's
itself.
see how that goes. It'd just be a crazy experiment to do that for a week. No, oh shit, I gotta be kind. I mean, maybe everyone could get ulcers. I don't know, because we experience that rage. We want to let it out, but I don't know. We need to be. We seem to be climbing over each other to get somewhere, and I think it would just be much cooler if we were lifting each other up.
I agree. Well, Luke, to summarize, we talked about ancient civilizations, psychedelics, and then obviously what the world has come to now. And we should love each other and tell the truth, as a friend of mine says. Everybody's one, and we all bleed the same. It doesn't matter. 6 feet under, nothing matters anymore. So yeah,
That's
I
right.
agree. As long as things spread positivity and don't hurt anyone, I believe.
Steal my parking space.
No. Yeah. It's human nature. We're primates, but
everything is really important and nothing matters.
Exactly. Luke, thank you so much, man. We got to do this again.
Yeah, if you ever want to talk about more archeological stuff or more,
definitely.
Let me know.
We'll chat after this. Let people know where they can find your work again. To watch out for your documentary. Where will that be out? Because I'll be interested in that as well.
It's entirely self-funded. I've done it all myself, and when I'm done with it, I'm going to try to sell it to Netflix or Amazon or Hulu or Disney.
Right on, dude.
And and if I can't do that, then I'll probably just paywall it on YouTube. The other thing I wanted to say really quickly, if I can, for a bit of shameless self-promotion, I do take tours at the moment just to Egypt with Yusuf Oyen, although I have done Peru and Bolivia, and we might do Mexico in the future. Details of the October tour, the special permissions tour, where we have 6 special permissions to actually go inside a lot of sites that are usually closed and explore, like the Assyrian and the Osiris Shaft and Tomb, the Great Pyramid, all kinds of stuff where you don't usually get to go in and do your thing, Abu Rawash. So you can find details for that on my website too, and on my Instagram. My website, www.enigmasoftheancient.world. And I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. And yeah.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. If you ever want to go to Egypt, which I will be doing, you know who to hit up.
Really enjoyed this episode. Mixes 2 of my favorite things together. And fascinating stuff. Really hope you guys enjoyed it. Remember to follow us on social media at the Juan on Juan Podcast. Also, you can shoot me an email. Check out our blog. Our website is thejuanonjuanpodcast.com. My email is thejuanonjuanpodcast@gmail.com. Shoot me an email if you want to be on the show, have anything interesting to talk about, things of that nature. Really appreciate the support, and until next time.